Hi everyone, this is the second part of the video lesson because I do them in 15-minute chunks so that I can easily upload them to YouTube. This is on chapter 24 of Frankenstein. Please look at the first part if you haven't, because it has the structural stuff and it has some keywords and other useful things that underpin this. We're going to explore a little bit more of the complexity of Frankenstein's character in this closing chapter, because in the last video there were quotes where he was telling Walton, "Don't let your ambition turn you evil. Don't let your ambition kill you and those you love." And yet, when it comes to the crunch, we know that he is addicted to glory. And what happens is there is a little event where we see him right back in his obsessive phase. Because some sailors come in and they say, "Look, some of us have died already, and we're frozen in the ice, we're running out of food and supplies. When the ice unfreezes, we need to go home." He's lying there like half unconscious, and he wakes up and he does this long speech which is like a rant. The only point he gets this angry in the book is when he's arguing with the creature, and he argues with these poor men who, again, like the creature, are representing working class poorer people, diverse people, because they are not Englishmen. And you see this rich white Englishman who's addicted to glory flipping straight back into, "You lot should risk yourselves so that people like me, i.e. me and Walton, can be famous." That's essentially what he's saying. And Shelley's agenda is for us not to think that he is great for saying this. It's to say, look, this glory is like an addiction. When he's calm, he can see that it's immoral. But when he gets this kind of outraged, he can't. He sniffed a bit of glory, and this is what he says. Now, the ellipses show that I've cut out bits of the speech. "What do you mean? What do you demand of your captain? Are you then so easily turned from your design? Did you not call this a glorious expedition? And wherefore was it glorious?" All those questions. It's like he's ranting. The language reminds me very much of when he's ranting at the creature. That's the level of anger he is. "You were hereafter to be hailed as benefactors of your species." So he's talking, he says, benefactors and species. That will remind us of his reasons. When he was talking about creating the creature at first, he said he wanted to be a benefactor to a new species. So those words, benefactor and species, it's a little light bulb for us to say, yeah, he's back in that mindset. Back in that mindset when he made his big mistake. But this time he's peer pressuring Walton and boss pressuring, because he's higher social status, these poor sailors into making the mistake again. And now behold, with your first imagination of danger, it's not an imagination. They're all dying. He's literally dying. It is not an imagination that is dangerous. Yeah, so there he's not seeing straight. "And you need not to have come thus far and dragged your captain to the shame of defeat, merely to prove yourselves cowards." So he talks about dragging your captain to the shame of defeat. They want to survive, and their survival, he calls them cowards. He insults them. "Oh, be men, or be more than men." He wanted to be more than men. He wanted to be a god. All of his earlier problematic thinking is back. "Do not return to your families with the stigma of disgrace marked on your brows." So he's shaming them again. But this is all of his previous problematic thinking, his previous immoral thinking has come back in an instant. It's like flamed up like an explosion. "Do not return to your family with stigma of disgrace marked on your brows." He cut himself off from his family to not fail, and regretted it for the rest of his life, and says, "If only I'd returned to my family before I created this creature. If only I'd failed." And then suddenly he's back to, "Don't return to your family with disgrace." It's like he's not seeing straight again. It's like old Victor has come back. I almost think of it like an addiction. Yeah, he's sniffed that scientific glory and he can't help himself. "Return of heroes who have fought and conquered and know not what it is to turn their backs on the foe." So he turns it very military. Obviously the ice is the foe, but it's very military, maybe reflections of the fact that his science turned into a personal fight. And in a personal fight, in a battle and conquer, people get killed. And, the context there was, at the time, there were a lot of these people who were very skilled at one thing, but because they were so obsessed with one thing, they blinded themselves. They covered their eyes to the moral disgrace of what they were doing. So examples from the time, which are also relevant today, are people like the early businessmen who traded in slaves. Very skilled at making money, but very evil. And I think Shelley is perhaps warning us that evil doesn't look like the monster. Evil doesn't look like someone stupid or someone ugly or someone different. Evil looks like each one of us if we blind ourselves to morality and we obsess over something. You know, somebody evil can be very skilled at something, very eloquent, just like Frankenstein said about the creature. Eloquent means able to speak. They can seem very convincing, very nice, but it's not like they're like a monster or a ghost. It's an otherwise sane and clever person like Frankenstein who has this moral bit missing from them. So, they might say, I'm a businessman, but then you dig deeper, and I'm saying businessman because in those days it was all men. I'm a businessman. You dig deeper, their business is kidnapping people from their families, sailing them across to America where they might die and selling them. And you're like, you're a monster. And they're like, I'm a businessman. I just like the same as any other shopkeeper. And they've blinded themselves to the fact that they're killing human life. That's in Shelley's time the argument she would have had with a pro-slavery person. They would have said, oh, we're just business people. And she'd be like, no, you're not. Those are human beings. What are you talking about? Because she was an abolitionist. Here you see it. It's like, he's like, well, Walton is a scientist. Why are you letting him down? No, he's not. He's killing his crew. It's awful. And nowadays you have moral dilemmas that are similar. You have things like certain business people, like the company of Virgin, where they don't pay their taxes to the British government. But then when their company is at risk, they ask for a bailout of millions of pounds. And it's like, wait, but you don't pay your tax. You don't pay your tax for us, for our roads, for our infrastructure, for our schools that train your employees, for our universities that train your employees. You don't do any of that. And now you're asking for a bailout. And they'd be like, but we're a big employer. We're great. Yeah, well, if you're a big employer, pay your taxes when the times are good. It happens all the time. And Shelley, whether talking about nowadays or talking about then, was very aware that the unfortunate situation that can turn people to have this moral blindness is a lot of privilege. I mean, in everyday speak, I wouldn't use this in an essay. They're spoilt brats. Adults who are spoilt brats. Rich, white men mainly, particularly in those days. No one's ever said no to them. When they see servants, they see them almost as like, robots or something there to do a function. They don't see them as human. They're very privileged, and it leads to these moral gaps, like in this speech here. And we, the reader, are meant to be unhappy with that, shocked by that, and we're meant to be worried about the capacity to which people can change. It's an uncomfortable ending. Now, on that, about an uncomfortable ending, these are the final words of the novel, so pause them and read them. The final words of the novel come from the creature. Frankenstein dies, and the creature comes and sees him, and it is the creature, not the privileged human who made the mistake, but the creature whose anger and torment came out of trauma. And if you want to talk about morality, a simple reading is, oh, they've both done bad things. But think about it. The creature, his crime came out of trauma and pain. And that's what turned him bad. And we cannot avoid that. And, if we're looking at modern context, when you have riots and some people start looting, if people see every day that the police protect the rich, and they go into a march against the police, a minority of those people will get so angry that they will start to destroy the property of the rich. And that's not to say that that is legal, That is not to say that that is right, but that is understandable. If your whole life you've seen the rich get richer, the police protect them, and then the police come in a poor area and shoot people, like even children, or like a nurse asleep in her bed, that level of rage will come out. And so the creature, and I'm kind of going to A level here, there's a thing called a post-colonial reading, where you can look at the creature and you can equate the suffering of the creature with groups that have suffered racism and slavery, that the behavior it exhibits is justified because of prejudice. Not that it's right, but that we can explain how angry the creature feels. But let's look, he is given the last word in the novel, not the rich white men, the creature. Farewell, I leave you in the last, I leave you, and in you the last of humankind, whom these eyes will ever behold. Farewell, Frankenstein. If thou wert yet alive, and yet cherished a desire of revenge against me, it would be better satiated in my life than in my destruction. But it was not so. Thou didst seek my extinction, that I might not cause greater wretchedness. And if yet, in some mode unknown to me, thou hadst not ceased to think and feel, thou wouldst not desire against me a vengeance greater than that which I feel. Blasted as thou wert, my agony was still superior to thine, for the bitter sting of remorse will not cease to rankle my wounds until death shall close them forever. So here he says, I know you suffered, but I suffered more. And it's interesting, Frankenstein often says he suffered, but there's a bit more genuine feeling here. But soon he cried with sad and solemn enthusiasm, I shall die, and what I now feel be no longer felt. Soon these burning miseries will be extinct. I shall ascend my funeral pyre triumphantly, and exult in the agony of the torturing flames. The light of that conflagration will fade away. My ashes will be swept into the sea by the winds. So he goes back to nature. My spirit will sleep in peace. Again, he is a human, and he has atoned and is sorry. Or if it thinks, it will surely think thus. Farewell. So, he's sorry, he's punishing himself, and he will get redemption. Bit like Justine. At this point, he's almost aligned with Justine. He knows he's done wrong, although she didn't do wrong, and he's punishing himself. He sprang from the cabin window as he said this, and upon the ice raft which lay close to the vessel, he was soon borne away by the waves and lost in the darkness and distance. So he comes and he goes back to nature, to the sublime, to things that are greater than we understand, the Arctic, the darkness, space, and he intends to burn and die. Burning is a purifying. They used to burn witches to clean the devil out of them. So that's symbolic. He purifies himself. He kills himself in sorrow, and he gets redemption. And that is the last end of the novel. And she's not saying it was okay for him to be violent. She's not saying that. But she's kind of giving us an insight into why people end up acting out in such violent ways. And she gives him that last voice. She voices the helpless in the novel. Now, from post-colonial reading, so that's thinking about, because remember she was anti-slavery, and we now know, slavery has ended, and we've just, been through many layers of human rights since then, right up to Black Lives Matter. This is, that idea of giving the person who was rejected a voice, not the final word to the rich white people. And I do think that she very much was thinking about that, both as a woman and somebody who believed in anti-racism. So there's a lot of context there, but we also see as a character that he is quite a lot more developed at the end than Victor. Now, what happens to Walton? We never know. I might do another video about that, but we literally never know what happens to Walton. So you can say, does he die? Does he stay alive? It's an uncomfortable ending, and it's a tense one. Okay, so that brings me to the end of the second video. Let me know if there are any other videos you'd like. I will do some more. Enjoy your home study, and email me even if you're not in my class with any literacy questions. If you're in my class, message me. Enjoy the rest of the lockdown. Stay 2 meters apart. Stay safe. Don't crowd together to get into Primark. Bye bye.